If you had to choose between honor and love, which would you let die first? They say the desert teaches you how to live with silence. But silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's what grows in the space where truth can't speak. I learned that the year Jesse Klein rode into town with nothing but a violin strapped to his back and a look in his eye that said he'd already buried more than most men live. My name's Rosalind Calder. Folks called me the sheriff's daughter, like it was a second name, like it explained me. Maybe it did. I spent my childhood on front porches, listening to my father clean his rifle and say things like, "Justice doesn't flinch," or "There's right, and then there's dead." Mama passed when I was 11. After that, the town looked at me with something between pity and possession. Honor was expected of me. So was distance, and I gave them both. Most nights, I stayed behind the windows of the old Calder house, sewing in the lantern light, watching folks drift in and out of the saloon across the street. Fights, dancing, gunfire, a baby born in the alley. I saw it all. But none of it moved me, until I heard that violin. It was the first Thursday of July, right after the summer dust storms had passed. The air still carried heat, but it wasn't cruel. I was threading a needle when the sound came, soft, low, like the wind had learned how to grieve. A tune that didn't belong in this town. Didn't belong anywhere, really. I moved to the window. There he was, sitting on the broken bench outside the saloon, boots dusty, shirt torn at the shoulder, a weather-beaten hat tilted just enough to hide his face. And that violin, dark wood, polished with wear, cradled like it was the last thing in the world worth holding. No one stopped him. No one said a word. They just listened. I watched him until the song faded into the sound of hooves and laughter and bottles breaking. But the silence he left behind stayed with me longer than the song ever did. Later that night, I asked Pa about the man. "Drifter," he muttered. "Name's Klein, I think." Got a strange look in his eye. "You stay away, Rose." I nodded. But I didn't stay away. The next evening, I crossed the street. He was there again. Same bench, same violin, same song. I stood a few feet off and waited for him to finish. When he did, he looked up, just once, and I swear that one glance told me everything. He's been running. He's tired. And he doesn't expect kindness anymore. I offered a small smile. He nodded. That was it. For 3 nights, we did the same thing. Me standing, him playing. Never spoke. Just watched and listened. Then, on the 4th night, I sat down beside him. He didn't stop playing, didn't flinch, just shifted slightly, like he was making room for someone he wasn't sure would stay. When the song ended, I said, "You play like someone with too many ghosts." He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders softened. "I play so I don't have to remember their names." His voice was low, hoarse, full of something I didn't dare touch yet. "Where you from?" I asked. He looked straight ahead, wherever they stopped chasing me. That should have been enough to scare me off. A man who didn't answer plainly. A man who played songs that made your bones ache. But it wasn't fear I felt. It was understanding. "You know," I said softly, "people around here think silence is safe." He turned to me then, and for the first time I saw his eyes. Hazel, but with a kind of gray in them, like a storm that never quite passes. "And what do you think?" he asked. "I think silence can kill you slower than a bullet." He didn't reply, but the next note he played was softer, and somehow closer. After that, we started talking. Not much, just enough. He told me he learned the violin from his mother, a woman who died in a fire when he was 16. He'd played through the screaming, he said. Played until the walls came down. I didn't ask more. I told him about my mama, about how my father carved laws into the town with calloused hands and stone-cold eyes. How sometimes when I sat at the window at night, I imagined myself disappearing into the wind. He didn't laugh. He just listened, like I was worth the space my words took up. We met every night after that, until the day the poster arrived. It was tacked to the wall outside the sheriff's office. Black ink on yellow paper. Wanted, Jesse Klein. Armed and dangerous. Robbery, possibly murder. $500 reward. My breath stopped cold. The man I'd been sitting beside was a wanted man. I didn't ask Pa that night. I didn't say a word. Instead, I waited for Jesse by the saloon. When he arrived, violin in hand, I pulled him into the alley. "It's true, isn't it?" I asked. He didn't run, didn't lie. He just said, "Depends which part." I looked at him, really looked, and all I saw was a man with too many wounds and nowhere left to hide. "You should go," I whispered. "I was already leaving," he said, "but I stayed because of you." And right there, under the moonlight, and the weight of everything unsaid, I realized something that scared me more than any wanted poster ever could. I didn't want him to go, even if it meant betraying the man who raised me, even if it meant turning my back on the name Calder, even if it meant risking everything I'd ever known to be right. So I ask you again, if you had to choose between honor and love, would you let the world burn to keep one song playing in the dark? Because I had made my choice, and that night I asked the outlaw to play me one more song, just for me. And I knew in my bones that nothing would ever be the same again. If love came to you wearing the face of betrayal, would you still reach out and hold it? He didn't play that night, not the violin. Not the man who had been haunting the saloon with his slow, aching melodies each evening. Jesse Klein just stood there in the alley, the moon sliding down his cheek like it was brushing goodbye. And I stood across from him, knowing that every second we shared was a crime not yet punished. I was already leaving, he'd said. But he didn't move. Neither did I. The poster burned in my mind. Robbery, possibly murder, $500 reward. My father had read it over coffee, muttered something like, "Bastard won't get far," and gone about his morning. I'd nearly dropped the mug I was drying, because I knew then I had a secret. I'd looked into the eyes of that man, listened to his sorrow under the stars, heard him speak of loss with the voice of someone who hadn't had the chance to weep properly in years. And still, there it was. His name in ink. A bounty nailed to the wall like truth itself. But truth, I was learning, didn't always come in black and white. That night, I didn't ask him what he'd done. I asked him something worse. Was there someone? He looked at me like he understood what I meant. Not just the words, the ache behind them, the fear, the wondering if I was about to step into a story that already had another woman's fingerprints on its heart. "There was," he said. I nodded. He looked down. "But she died in a fire." My breath caught. He didn't owe me the story, but I felt the weight of it drop between us like a body lowered into earth. "I'm sorry," I said. He nodded once, and then, maybe because the silence was too much, maybe because the memory hurt worse when it stood still, he raised the violin and played. This wasn't the song from the saloon. This was something slower, sadder, The kind of song you don't write. The kind that writes you. That pulls itself out of your rib cage and sets itself loose on the wind. It was full of ash and grief and something like hope, if you squinted. I listened. I didn't blink. And when the last note faded, I knew two things. That man was carrying more pain than most people could survive. And I was falling in love with him anyway. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window with the lantern out, hands curled in my lap like they'd been holding something invisible. I watched the sheriff's star catch the moonlight from where Pa left it on the kitchen table. For a second, I imagined lifting it, holding it like a weight in my hand, and walking it back to Jesse. "Turn yourself in," I'd say. "Let the law be what it is." But I couldn't, because I'd seen his eyes. I'd heard that melody, and I'd tasted the truth in it. Not the kind made of testimony and courtrooms and judges, but the kind made of fire and silence, and the things you carry when no one's left to help you carry them. The next day, I met him behind the church. He was waiting, leaning against the stone wall like he'd been carved into it. A shadow with a heartbeat. "I shouldn't be here," I said. He nodded. "Neither should I. I'm not going to turn you in." He looked up. "I never thought you would." I stepped closer. My voice cracked. "But I need to know. What happened? What really happened?" He hesitated. And then he told me. The robbery. It was real. But not how the papers said. He'd been working for a rancher out in Arizona Territory, a cruel man, the kind who beat his hands red on the backs of boys too young to shave. Jesse stood up to him, got fired, and when he left, the payroll disappeared too. Jesse never touched it, he swore, but the rancher had power, friends in the law, and a bitter streak a mile wide. And then, 2 weeks later, the fire. A house burned down. His friend inside. No proof, just suspicion. And so Jesse ran, not because he was guilty, but because he knew how quickly truth drowned in fear. I believed him. God help me, I did. Because that kind of sorrow, you can't fake that. We sat together after that, backs against the wall of a church built by settlers who thought they could build heaven out of bricks and dust. We didn't speak much, just shared the quiet. His hand brushed mine. Not a grab, not a pull, just a breath. And I didn't move away. That night, I went home, and I didn't speak to Pa. I just stared at the rifle above the mantel, and wondered if someday it would be pointed at the man I loved. So I ask you, if you had to choose between your family's pride and a man with no name left but yours, would you hold his hand in the fire? Or would you step away and let him burn alone? I already knew my answer, but the world was about to ask the question out loud. And when it did, there would be no room left for silence. If the person you loved stood on the other end of a loaded gun, and your own father was the one holding it, would you step between them? Would you take the bullet? That question started haunting me the week the bounty hunter came through. He didn't look like much. Just another man in a dust-stained coat and cracked boots, the kind of stranger who passed through towns like ours without leaving a name. But I knew the moment I saw him that he wasn't passing through. He was circling, smelling the air like a coyote, and he had eyes that didn't blink when they looked at you. He walked into the saloon the second evening he arrived, stared at the wall where the wanted posters hung like dead leaves. Jesse's face was there, still faded, still fluttering in the heat. But now it meant something different. Now it meant war. My heart wouldn't stop pounding. Even as I poured drinks and cleared tables, trying to act like I hadn't noticed him, trying to forget that I had memorized the lines in Jesse's jaw, the shade of his eyes, the sound of his violin under a rising moon. But it all came back when the bounty hunter said one word to the barkeep. "Klein?" I slipped out the back door, my apron still tied, breath caught in my ribs. Jesse was in the hills again, camped beneath the cottonwoods where the creek split and the world turned quiet. He liked it there, said the trees didn't ask questions. He'd been sleeping in a bedroll beneath the stars and keeping the violin wrapped in oilcloth like it was the only thing in the world that still believed in him. I found him just before nightfall. "You need to go," I said, "tonight." He didn't ask why, didn't press, just took one long look at my face and said, "He's close, closer than you think." He nodded, then reached for the violin and tied it to his saddle. I watched the way his hands moved, calm, steady, even though the ground between us felt like it could split wide open. "I don't want you to be here when he comes," he said. "I'm not leaving you." He turned then, slowly, like someone who'd lost too many things to believe anyone would stay. "Rosalind." I stepped toward him. "If I let you go, and he kills you, then what am I supposed to live with?" His jaw clenched and he looked away. "I can run," he said softly, "but I won't take you down with me." I stared at him, heart hammering. "You don't get to decide what I risk," I said. "I already made my choice." Silence stretched between us, a silence so loud it made the leaves shake. Then he did something he'd never done before. He kissed me, not like in the stories, not soft and sudden. It was slow and tired and deep, like every word he hadn't said finally gave up and took shelter in that one moment. Like the war inside both of us paused just long enough for the world to feel still again. When we parted, neither of us spoke. Because what do you say when love is no longer a question? You just breathe, and then you run. We packed by firelight, took only what we needed: water, dried meat, the violin, a single blanket, and the little tin box where he kept the ashes of his old life. He never told me what was in it. I never asked. By midnight, we were gone. And by dawn, we weren't far enough. The shots came at sunrise, sharp, cold, close. Jesse threw me off the horse and pulled his rifle before I could blink. We ducked behind rocks, hearts pounding, dirt in our teeth. The bounty hunter was good, I'll give him that. He moved like he had no shadow, like he didn't need one. We fired twice, missed both, and then came the voice. "Jesse Klein, I've got no interest in the girl. Step out, and I'll make it quick." Jesse's jaw twitched. His knuckles tightened around the wood of his rifle. I grabbed his arm. "No," I said, "he's bluffing." But Jesse didn't look at me. Not fully, not like he used to. He looked like a man already walking toward the end. And then, clear as day, came a second voice. "My father, I gave you a warning, Rose," he shouted from the ridge. "You bring him back, or I bring you both down." My stomach turned to ash. He was here. My father. Sheriff Calder, the law. My blood. I turned to Jesse and he looked at me. Not scared, not even angry. Just sad, like he'd known it would end this way from the start. "I'll go," he said, "if it keeps you alive." I stepped in front of him, hands shaking. "You go, you die, you know that." He didn't argue, because he did know, and he still would have gone, because love like his doesn't run to save itself. It stays to save you, and that's when I realized this wasn't his battle anymore. It was mine. So I stood tall, stepped out from behind the rock, let the bounty hunter see my face, and I shouted into the still morning, "If either of you fires, you'll be killing me." A silence fell, the kind that carries choice. I saw my father on the ridge, his rifle still raised, his daughter standing between a fugitive and the law, between blood and truth, between the past and what might have been a future. And I saw it, the crack in him, the pain, the realization that I wasn't his little girl anymore. I was a woman, and I had chosen. So now I ask you, if love makes you stand where bullets might fall, does that make you foolish? Or does it mean you finally understand what love really is? Because I stood there, shaking, scared, and stubborn, and I didn't move, not even when the next shot came. If you had to lose everything you were just to keep one person breathing, would you do it, even knowing you might not survive the morning? That question wasn't just a whisper in my mind anymore. It was a scream, and the echo of it rattled through the canyon long after the last bullet didn't hit me, because no one fired that morning. Not my father, not the bounty hunter, not Jesse. It was like time had slowed down, caught between two heartbeats, trying to figure out if we were going to destroy each other, or simply stand there until the sun burned out. My arms were raised, palms wide. I was daring them, both of them, to make me a casualty of their justice, and in that standoff of bloodlines and bounties, silence won. The bounty hunter was the first to lower his weapon. Not out of mercy, just calculation. He'd seen something in my eyes, not just desperation, but determination. The kind that can't be bargained with. The kind that says, I'd rather die beside him than live without him. Then Pa, his hands didn't shake. They never did. But I watched the muscles in his jaw tighten, like he was biting down on something too big to swallow. He turned his horse. Just once he looked back at me. I didn't wave. I didn't cry. I just watched the man who raised me ride away, slower than usual, like he was dragging behind him a weight he didn't know how to carry. That was the last time I saw him with a badge on his chest. We left that canyon before the sun climbed too high, rode hard and fast toward the edges of nowhere. I didn't ask Jesse where we were going. He didn't ask if I was sure. We already knew. By nightfall, we made it to the town of Marrow's Hollow, just a scattering of homes and a saloon so crooked it leaned into the wind like an old man. Jesse found a room upstairs, paid with what little he had left. I curled up beside him on the thin mattress and listened to the sound of his breathing, steady but heavy. The kind of breath you carry after too many nights of almosts. We stayed there for 3 days, and for 3 nights he didn't touch the violin. I can't play it here, he said once when I asked. This place doesn't deserve the sound. It broke my heart hearing that. Because if there was one thing that proved Jesse still had a soul, a real one, it was that violin. And now even that had gone quiet. On the 4th morning, he said we had to move again. The bounty wouldn't go away just because we crossed a few hills. Somebody would come eventually. Somebody always does. But something changed that day. We were packing what little we had, saddlebags, tin canteens, a few pieces of jerky, when I turned and saw him standing in the doorway, still as death, his face pale. "What is it?" I whispered. He didn't answer, but I followed his eyes out to the street, the bounty hunter, and behind him 2 more men, not lawmen, not even mercenaries, worse, ranch guns, paid killers who didn't ask questions, and one of them had a torch. I ran to Jesse, grabbed his arm. "We have to go now." He looked down at me, calm but not peaceful. "I can't run anymore, Rose." I grabbed his face, pulled it toward mine. "Then fight. Just don't leave me." His eyes said what his mouth didn't. I won't, but I might not survive. We slipped out the back window, took the alley behind the stable. I remembered the terrain from the map on the wall inside the saloon, a narrow ridge west of town where the canyon twisted sharp and deep. If we could make it there before sundown, We didn't. They caught us at the creek bed. The bounty hunter called out first. "End of the line, Klein." Jesse pulled me behind a rock. He had his rifle drawn, but I could see the tremble in his wrist. Not fear, exhaustion. "You get out of here," he said. "Head for the canyon. Ride hard." "No," I snapped. "Rosalind." "No." He looked at me, really looked, and the fight went out of him. Not because he didn't care, because he cared too much to waste 1 second arguing. I stood beside him, and when the first shot came, I fired back. I don't remember aiming. I just remember the sound, sharp, final, a scream. Then silence. We hit one of them, but the bounty hunter kept coming. And Jesse, he took a bullet to the shoulder, hard. It spun him sideways, knocked the breath clean out of him. I screamed, pulled him behind the rock. My hands were covered in his blood, warm, sticky, terrifyingly real. He blinked at me, eyes wide with pain. "I'm okay," he muttered. He wasn't, but he was still alive. And that's all I needed. We made it to the canyon by dusk, half carrying, half dragging. Jesse's blood soaked my blouse. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the reins. Behind us, no more shots, just wind and fire. The men had set the town ablaze. We watched from the ridge as the flames licked the sky, swallowing wood and rope and memory. Marrow's Hollow, gone. A warning. Or maybe a curse. Jesse leaned into me. I held him tighter, and in the crackling dark he whispered, "Play it." "What?" He nodded toward the violin. "You carry it, you play it. I don't know how. You'll learn." I looked down at the polished wood, the strings still intact, the bow worn soft with years of sorrow. My hands touched it like it might vanish. I raised it to my chin, closed my eyes, and let the wind carry the first note. Shaky, raw, broken, but alive. So now I ask you, if everything around you turned to ash, but love still had breath in its lungs, would you follow it? Even if it meant starting over with nothing but music and memory. Because that night, beneath the burning sky, with blood on my skin and fire in the hills, I played the outlaw's violin for the first time, and I knew this story wasn't ending. It was only beginning. If you had to vanish to protect the one you love, would you let the world believe you died, just to give them a chance to live? Some truths don't arrive all at once. They drip in slow like snowmelt in the mountains, and when they reach you, they're cold, icy, quiet, but undeniable. That's how it was after the fire. Jesse and I rode until the stars blurred. He passed out once, maybe twice, but I never stopped. I kept us moving, guiding the horse with one hand, the other pressed to the wound in his shoulder, like I could keep the blood from remembering it wanted out. We found a trapper's cabin 2 ridgelines west, empty. Abandoned years ago by the look of it. Broken windows, dust in the corners. But the roof held and the well still worked. So we stayed, and the world forgot us. He healed, slowly, took weeks. I boiled bandages, cleaned wounds, learned the parts of his pain by touch. Every wince, every ragged breath, every time he said, "I'm fine," when we both knew he wasn't. I learned to read those like verses in a holy book, and he taught me the violin, not with notes or rules, but by feeling. Don't play the song, he told me, play the truth of it. So I did, clumsily at first, like a child learning to walk, but the strings began to know me, and over time that music, his music, became the only language I trusted. Winter came, hard and fast. Snow stacked like secrets outside the door. We burned what we could, wore each other's warmth at night. I'd lie awake and listen to the wind, half expecting hoofbeats or gunshots or Pa's voice cutting through the cold. But none of it came. Silence became our shield, and in that quiet, something bloomed. I used to wonder what love really was. Not the poems or the courtships or the dances at dusk. I mean real love. The kind that holds your hair when you're sick, that learns your scars like landmarks, that finds you in your worst moment, covered in ash and rage and grief, and doesn't leave. That winter, I stopped wondering, because I saw it. In him, in me, in us. He kissed me one morning just after the thaw began. His lips cracked, breath warm, eyes soft like candlelight. "I want to stay here," he said, "with you. No more running." But I knew what he meant. Not forever, just as long as the world would let us. And the world? It didn't wait long. Spring brought travelers. A wagon train lost its way and passed through the valley. We offered food, water, nothing more. But one of them, a man with too many questions and a bounty poster folded into the lining of his coat, looked too long at Jesse's face. 3 days later the rider came. Not Pa, not the bounty hunter. Someone worse. The law with a memory. He didn't shoot. He didn't even threaten. Just said, "You're Jesse Klein. You can ride with me and stand trial. Or die here." Jesse didn't speak. He just looked at me, and I knew he was going to go, because love, real love, sometimes means walking into fire so the other doesn't have to. "No," I whispered. He touched my cheek. "It's time, Rose." I grabbed his coat. "You can't leave me. Not now. Not after all this." "I'm not leaving," he said, voice breaking. "I'm buying you a life." He kissed me one last time and rode away, just like that. No violin, no song. No goodbye that didn't hurt. I didn't follow, because I'd made my choice once, and he was making his now. That was 10 years ago. I never saw him again. Word traveled slow in the West. I heard stories, a trial in another county, evidence lost, a mistrial. Then nothing. Like he vanished again into the same silence we once shared. Maybe he's still out there, maybe not. But every night since, I've played his violin, sometimes in saloons, where the drunks don't listen, sometimes for children who don't understand the ache in it, and sometimes just for the trees under the cottonwoods, where the wind remembers him better than I ever could. I married once, a good man, kind. We had a small ranch, some peace, a garden that grew strawberries in the spring. But I never loved again. Not like that, not with my bones. And sometimes, when the wind's just right, I hear it. That first song he played. The one outside the saloon. The one that cracked me open and made me feel again. It's faint, almost not there. But it always finds me. So I ask you now, if the world gave you one great love, but asked everything in return, would you take it? Would you hold it, knowing it could never stay? I did, and it changed everything, because sometimes the outlaw lives in your heart longer than he ever lived in the world. And the music never ends, even after the rider's gone, even after the fire's cold, even when your name is no longer your own. The song plays on, and I play it still.